When we're graphing quadratic functions, the very first thing we're going to do is exactly what we learned on that previous page, was how to find the axis of symmetry and vertex. Because remember, when we graphed absolute value, we would start by finding that vertex point and putting it in the middle of the table. So we're going to do that same step with quadratics, except for to find that vertex point, we've got to use that axis of symmetry formula that we just learned how to use, and then we're going to find the vertex by plugging x in to get y. Okay, so that's where we're going to start with, is using our axis of symmetry. So a in this equation is -3. B in this equation isn't there. There isn't an x value, so it's 0. And C also is 0 because there isn't a number. So the only value I have is A. If I'm going to use the axis of symmetry formula, x equals -b over 2 times A. 0 divided by anything is 0, so our x value is 0. So that is our vertex is x, so I'm going to put that in the middle of the table. I'm now going to find the y value. Remember, f of x is really our fancy y. And we found x already, so we're going to substitute that in. -3 times 0 squared. We like it when it's 0 because 0 makes things, the multiplication, easy, because that's just 0. -3 times 0 is 0. So our vertex is 0, 0. We can go ahead and plot that on our graph. We know we're going to have to plot that in a minute. Okay, how do we get the other points on our table? Remember, we're just taking the 3 numbers to the left of our vertex is x and the 3 numbers to our right of our x. So to the left of 0 would be -1, -2, -3. To the right of 0 is 1, 2, and 3. We're now going to either use our calculator to calculate it, mental math, or work it out physically to substitute each of these x's in to get our f of x or our y. So if I plug this in, -3 squared is 9. 9 times -3 is a -27. I'm just working it out with mental math. Again, you can use your calculator. You can work it out physically like we were doing an absolute value where we would write it out in the box. Whatever works for you. -2 squared would be 4. -3 times 4 would be -12. -1 squared is -1 times -3. Sorry, +1 times -3 is a -3. So that would be our 3 values. And then when I plug in 1, I still get -3. When I plug in 2, I get -12. When I plug in 3, I get -27. Notice some of these numbers are not going to be on our graph. And that happens. You're going to plot which numbers will fit. So the only values that we can graph are -1, -3, and +1, -3. We don't have a -12 to graph. And so this is a curved graph that looks like this, where we have this almost umbrella shape. Now we're going to answer domain and range questions. Remember, the domain is asking questions about what are the x values? Is there a restriction on the x values? And the range is there a restriction on the y's? So x's go left and right. So it's asking, will it forever go to the left and right? And these arrows at the end mean, yes, it's headed down to the left and down to the right. So it is all real numbers. Any x value is on our graph. If we went in the -y direction in Desmos, we could zoom in and we'd see it never ever stops going left or right. The y's, though, it doesn't forever go in the positive y direction. It stops. So we have a limit. We learned how to write this limit with y such that y. So this is just saying y has a limit of, and we're going to write a statement that says, y is this maximum value. Remember, this is our maximum value. This is the ordered pair 0, 0. That y value is 0. That is the biggest y that it will be. So y has to be smaller than that number, so less than or equal to 0. So less than when it's opening down, because we have a maximum. It's going to be greater than when it's opened up, and we have a minimum. All right, we're going to practice again. So let's look at 6. So we got to use the axis of symmetry to find the x. We use the x to find the y of a vertex. So that's where we're going to start. So axis of symmetry, x equals negative b over 2a. So a is 1, b is negative 6, c is 11. Negative b, negative 6 over 2 times 1. Negative 6 is a positive 6. Positive 6 divided by 2 is 3. So our axis of symmetry is x equals 3. 3 in the x place in the middle of our table where we're going to put our vertex. We now need to find the y value of that vertex. So y equals 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 11. That's what you put in your calculator. 3 squared is 9. 9 minus 18 plus 11. When I calculate that, I'm going to get f of x or y equals 2. All right, there's my vertex. The 3 numbers to the left would be 2, 1, and 0. Counting down, the 3 numbers to the right, counting up, would be 4, 5, and 6. So x's, remember, we're just getting from the number line, the numbers to the left and the right of our vertex. The y values we have to calculate. So 0 squared minus 6 times 0 plus 11 is going to give us 11. Because it's really 0 minus 0 plus 11. 1 squared minus 6 times 1 plus 11. When I calculate that, that will be 6. 2 squared minus 6 times 2 plus 11. That'll give me 3. And then our numbers should repeat. So 3, 6, and 11. Again, that's not magic. That's just putting it in the calculator in the place of x, like we did to get the first y. All right, we're going to plot the numbers that do exist on this graph. So all of them but the very last ones. So we have our, we can start with our vertex, 3, 2. That would be our middle point. If I'm working to the left, 2, 3 would be there, and 1, 6 would be right here. That's the left side of our parabola. The right side of our parabola would be 4, 3, and 5, 6. And then this would make this curved graph that looks like this. So let's identify this. This is our minimum point, and that is the vertex we found, 3, 2. We'll use that in a minute to help identify our range. Our domain should be all real numbers because we're opening up or down. We won't ever, well, in math it does exist where it opens left or right, and that will change. Our range will be all real numbers and our domain will be limited. But for right now, while we're learning parabolas, we don't do left or right. We just do up or down. All right, our range is limited by that minimum point. So you need to write y such that y, and because the y value is 2, and that's the lowest point it will be, it's that number and everything bigger, so it is greater than or equal to 2. Okay. Any questions about the process of finding our axis of symmetry, using that value to plug it in? Can you use Desmos? Yes. Does that help you get all the points on the table? Not necessarily, right? You can try to pull up a table, but I haven't Googled how to do that yet, so I haven't showed you guys that. So right now we're remembering how to work through our table manually. So you can use Desmos to check, but you still need to remember how to use this formula that we're practicing using and how to then plug in the values from the table to get all those y values. So that's just either calculator work or working out manually like we did up here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip 7 and 8. I don't even know if yours has 7 or 8. I know 9 and 10 is not on your notes for today, but if you don't have a 7 or 8, We're going to skip that. And now we need to look at inequalities. So if you remember, when we learned graphing absolute value, we looked at what does the function look like with an equal sign and what does it look like with an inequality symbol. So those steps with inequalities the first time around still are going to exist. What's going to happen is we're going to graph it the way we just learned to graph it, but now we're going to use a dashed line when it is less than or greater than. So that's this point right here. We're going to use a dashed line when it's less than or greater than. And we're going to use a solid line when it's got the equal to symbol. And then the other difference is we're going to shade. So we're going to shade when it's greater than above our line, and we're going to shade below when it's the less than. So we'll go through those in problems 1 and 2 here. Okay, so to graph it, we still have to go through the same steps we were just practicing. So that's why we're skipping 7 and 8, because we're still practicing those same steps. We have to find the axis of symmetry. So the first thing we want to do is what is A? A is 1, B is 2, and C is negative 2. So if I'm going to use the axis of symmetry formula, X equals negative B, so negative 2 over 2 times our A value, which is 1. So negative 2 divided by 2 would be a negative 1. So our X value is negative 1. So that means the X in our table in the center for our vertex is negative 1. We're now going to find the Y value. So to find the Y, we're going to plug into our inequality. We're going to pretend it's an equation while we're solving. The inequality part only comes into play when we're actually physically graphing it and drawing those lines, and then we'll shade. Okay, so we're going to substitute in negative 1. So negative 1 squared plus 2. I'm going to have to scoot this over and zoom in a little bit. Negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 2. Negative 1 squared is a positive 1. Minus 2 would be negative 3. Negative 3 would be left over. So our vertex is negative 1, negative 3. Let's go ahead and plot that. Negative 1, negative 3 would be over here. Now we need the other points in our table. So points to the left of negative 1 would be negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. To the right of negative 1 would be 0, 1, and 2. We're going to plug in these numbers. Negative 4 squared plus 2 times negative 4 minus 2. When I plug that in, I'm going to get 8 minus 16 minus 2. That calculates to be a positive 6. I'm going to plug in negative 3. It's going to give me 9 minus 6 minus 2. So that's going to be a positive 1. And when I plug in negative 2, I get a negative 2. Our numbers are going to repeat, so we're going to get negative 2, 1, and 6. Go ahead and plot the numbers we can. I think all of these will fit on our graph. So we have the points 0, negative 2, and 2, negative 2. We have 1, 1. And negative 3, 1. And then we have 2, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That'd be up here. And then we have negative 4, 6. So I kind of went back and forth. I plotted our vertex, and then I did our left and our right, and then the next points, and then the next points. I kind of went through a symmetrical pattern when I plotted them. Not that that matters, but it helps you make sure your points are in the right place. I know they should be, if I didn't start with a fraction, right? I know if I'm using those whole numbers and I didn't have to change anything, our points should be in the same Y values. I should be able to draw a straight line from one point to the other. Now, before we draw that line that I just drew, because I was talking, we have to think about, is it going to be a dashed or a solid line? So we have that greater than symbol, the greater than symbol, so that tells me it's going to be dashed. So I can't draw a solid line. I have to draw a dashed line. So I'm going to draw a dashed line through my dots as best I can. And then we have to shade because it is greater than. We're going to shade above. So what that means is I shade all on the inside of our U shape. That's everything above. So that is the main difference between inequalities and functions. We still use the exact same steps to graph the points. It's just in that very last 2 steps of drawing our line and then shading. All right, we're gonna do one more because that's probably all the time we have. Let's see how far we can get through 2 here. But before we get to 2, were there any questions on 1? Maybe I made a math mistake. Okay, if there are no questions, let's go through problem 2 and go through all the same steps. We're gonna create our table of values by finding our vertex, and then we're gonna fill that in. So very first thing, identify A. A is -1, B is 4, C is -1. We're gonna use that axis of symmetry formula. So X equals -B over 2 times A. -4 over -2 would be a +2. So X equals 2. So in our table, in our middle point, we're gonna put our vertex is 2. Now we're gonna find our Y. So Y equals negative. Be careful on this one. This is where sometimes we fall into a mistake. That negative is not where X is. So negative goes on the outside of the parentheses, and we're not gonna square it. 4 times 2 minus 1. And that is separate from that. Okay, so -2 squared. So that's going to be a -4 because we didn't square that negative. Plus 8 minus 1. It's going to be a +4 minus 1. So that's got a +3. So Y is 3 when X is 2. So that's our other vertex point. Let's plot that. 2 to the right, up 3. Our vertex is going to be there. We know that this should open down because of this negative in front of our X squared. Our A is negative. So when we get our points, that'll let us know, are we calculating it right, is if our Y's get smaller than 3. So let's get our points to the left of 2. To the left of 2 would be 1, 0, and -1. To the right of 2 would be 3, 4, and 5. When I plug in these values into our equation, so -1 squared, -1 squared, plus 4 times -1 minus 1. When you put that all in calculated, I should get -6. When I plug in 0, I should get -1. When I plug in 2, I should get 3. No, I should get 2. Sorry, when I plug in 1, I should get 2. When I plug in 2, I do get 3. So -6, -1, 2. So we repeat 2, -1, -6. Went through it fast just for time's sake, right? But you would put them in the calculator or work them out manually. Gonna go ahead and plot these points. So 1, 2 would be here. 3, 2 would be there. 0, -1, and 4, -1. And then finally, -1, 6. Sorry, -6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be there. And then our final one, 5, -6 would be over here. So all 7 of our points should fit on our graph. Now we have to look at it is less than or equal to. So because it's less than or equal to, this is a solid line. So we can go ahead and draw a solid parabola shape. And then because it's less than, we're going to shade below. So this is going to be underneath here. If you were shading above, it would be everything around it. So not just above it up here, but this whole area would be considered above it. That's not this one, so, but for some reason our 2 examples did not have a below or above. Okay, we're going to stop there. If you would like to try the ones we skipped and then ask me, you can go ahead and try those. If not, we can take a small break before class is over since we had such long notes today.